What's up, fight fans? It's your boy Jordan Kurtz here with the MMA plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. Want to give a special shout out to the whole entire Mile High Sports crew. This week, obviously, out here remote, camping, had to shoot the video for the episode right here and send it out to you folks to be booming it out as we're here at this Wednesday at 1 o'clock time window. It was a great weekend for the fight game out there. I mean, we got to send off one of the legends of the game in a very memorable fashion, if you will. You know, some firsts or very rare things, if you will, for the UFC that happened per the event this last weekend. We're going to dive a little bit more into that as we go along with the program here. Want to give a shout out again, once again, across the board to the Mile High Sports crew, whether that's on the podcast side of things, on the website, the magazine, merch drops, events, so on and so forth, and especially my man Danny Bailey holding it down for me each and every week, producing the episode. We have no shortage of great things going on here on the Colorado sports scene, and with the coverage that these guys are providing, whether that is for the CU Buffs and everything surrounding there, whether it is Coach Prime related news to just the actuals of the athletics, to Denver Nuggets, lots of headlines going on with Jokic, to some of the other pieces that are being involved and added in this offseason, looking like they're going all in for a title run this year. Colorado Avalanche, postseason contender every single year right now. And then we have the Rockies pulling up the caboose out there. You know, not much that you could say about the Rockies other than they're the armpit of professional sports here in the Denver scene. Again, though, shout out to the entire Mile High Sports crew. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe wherever possible for them. Running down the list of some events coming up here on the local side of things, we have an all boxing event going down over the weekend for Sparta. Next weekend for CJJC on August 2nd, there's going to be the summer games going on. We encourage you to wear beach attire out there. Going to have a lot more on that event on the show next week, talking about some of the competitors. Going to be some big names involved there, seeing some returning faces as well as some brand new competitors to the scene, or also some of those athletes who are graduates, if you will, of our grapple games, which is kind of an audition or a proving grounds, if you will, to be able to come and compete on these bigger pro shows. Like I say, that's going to be going down at the Stampede on August 2nd. If you are interested in competing, they are still looking to fill a couple of matches out there. If you're a grappler in the area, make sure that you go to jujitsuclub.co to fill out that application. That's going to go directly to our matchmakers. They're going to do their thing, get you all taken care of on that side of things, get you matched up if there's opponents available. Following from that, on August 15th, we're going to have Colorado Combat Club. We're going to be back at the Stampede, another Friday night show. Huge names on the card. We've got Grant Neal in the main event. We've got a grudge match for the ages that's going to be in that co-main slot. We have Alex Rego taking on Micah Haas. That is bad blood every turn of the way. Rego has fought Micah's teammate as well as Micah once before. Rego's looking to get that lick back. He lost the decision a couple of years ago on a Fury card. Micah is looking to move his record to a continued unblemished 7-0 after that fight. So you have two guys with a lot on the line, one for reputation and getting the lick back, one wanting to continue that undefeated record and continuing his path toward the UFC. So again, like I say, that's a matchup that I am so excited to be able to see them run it back. There's been some chirping throughout the years back and forth between them. So again, anytime that you get a grudge match and they actually sign the dotted line and there's the opportunity for them to go out there and solve it, that is the beauty of our sport. That is the beauty of the fight game, is if you have conflict, you can use these to go out there and solve it. And they have that chance on August 15th. At the end of the month, I believe it's August 30th, you're going to have a show for Sparta. That is a full fight night where you're going to have MMA, some striking arts in the cage, so on and so forth. Looking forward to seeing what they bring for that last show. I know that there's, I believe, Devin McGinley's going to be back on that card. I think that there's a title for, I believe it's the vacant amateur welterweight spot. So really excited to see what they bring for that fight. There is going to be plenty of shows that are going on throughout the end of September into October. A few different shows that are popping up for the regional scene that are coming back to Colorado. So we're going to give you all of the heads up when those things are happening. Again, if you're interested in competing on any of these shows and you're an athlete, get with your coaches. the best thing that you can do is have your coaches be able to reach out on your behalf. There's some times where athletes are reaching out behind coaches' backs, so on and so forth. Not the greatest of situations. We want to make sure that everything is above board for all of you athletes out there. But that is the Colorado rundown for you right there. I want to give a big shout out to Isaiah Torres out of Pueblo, Colorado. He went out to Cage Titans and fought for their flyweight title over the weekend, won by a triangle choke finish. I mean, that's a kid who now, I believe he's 8-3-1, a flyweight who has had experience across multiple different regional shows and bigger platforms across the country. He's fought for the LFA. He's fought for Fury. He's fought for Uriah Faber's A1. He just won the Cage Titans title. He's fought for pretty much the entire run of the shows in the local region here on the Colorado end of things. He's fought on Battle. He's fought for Sparta. He's fought for MCF. The kid has competition experience across multiple different territories. Again, like I say, he's moved his record up to 8-3-1, I believe, and he's knocking on the door. He's he's in those later stages of his 20s, so he's still got time on the clock to be able to go out there and get after it, make a run. He's a relative of Adam Mini Hunt Martinez. He isn't the same throw caution to the wind at all costs type of fighter that Mini Hunt was, which was what made Mini Hunt so exciting half the time. But Isaiah is a tremendous striker who goes out there, and to give maybe a little bit of a comparison in the way that his game is, he's got a lot of Diaz in him. He's got a lot of Diaz in him, to where he wants to bang it out and he wants to slug it and brawl on the feet. But if you want to mix it up and start to get a little bit more technical, or as evidenced by this title fight this weekend, you want to take it to the canvas, all right, I've got the skills to be able to submit you at the same time. So congratulations to Isaiah Torres picking up that Cage Titans title over the weekend. Again, it's a kid with some promise that hopefully gets an opportunity to go on to the bigger show. Also want to throw a shout out to Isaiah Diggs. Isaiah Diggs, he got signed to the PFL. And, anytime that we have guys who come out of this Colorado footprint who go on to those bigger shows, they deserve their due and their recognition. He is undefeated currently right now, has a fight coming up here in a couple weeks for the PFL. Think that's it's something that we could all rally behind him. He's fought for us in Combat Club. He's fought for a couple, again, of the local shows, wrestled at Colorado State University, Pueblo. It's a kid who he's got a bright future and a big opportunity in front of him. That's it as far as our Colorado rundown. Stick around in the next segment here, and we'll be going through some more combat sports news. Over the weekend, you had UFC 318 going down at the Smoothie King Center down there in New Orleans. It was the final send-off for the Diamond Dustin Poirier. I mean, talk about a guy who paid his dues in full. Someone who had a legendary career, a resume that is almost unparalleled by anybody out there on the scene. And that is why when people were asking, okay, well, why is there so many things being done for Dustin this week? That is exactly why. Dustin is a guy who, again, you look at across his last 10, 11 fights, every single one of them was a top tier contender or a rising prospect like a BSD. That's the only one that you could say was maybe not someone who had either held a title, fought for a title, or was right on that edge. But Benoit Saint-Denis was that guy who was being fast-tracked to be put in that position. And Dustin Poirier said, okay, let me show you who I am still, and knocked him out. So, at every test that Dustin has been put up to, he's answered the bell. I mean, to go into this BMF fight, and, it's kind of unfortunate in this sense that this is just the way that it had to play out for Dustin, and that another title fight that he unfortunately fell short of. He did get the interim title, which I still believe that that's something that he should be recognized as a champion for forever for, but I understand where people have that entire discussion of, interim versus undisputed, so on and so forth. But Dustin Poirier, if you're going to say that, I mean, he's the Charles Barkley, he's the Dan Marino, he's the whoever you want to pull from any other sport reference of the greatest to never actually win it. That's Dustin Poirier right there. This weekend, he had the BMF fight against Max Holloway. It was a trilogy fight. Max blessed Holloway at the same time, one of the biggest fan favorites and, in his own respect, one of the toughest resumes throughout his run. And that's why both of these guys are so universally loved and highly regarded amongst basically everybody across the world in the fight community. I mean, I challenge you to find someone who is going to have a real validated reason to not like these guys. Yeah, you could say the whole stuff with Chandler, but even Chandler was singing Dustin's praises, and you could tell Dustin still, he wants no part of that with Michael Chandler, but that's a completely different discussion. Max Holloway came into this fight saying that he didn't want to be the first guy to be 0-6 in trilogy fights. Well, he was able to avoid that. Obviously, he lost the trilogy, all 3 fights against Alexander Volkanovski. His very first fight in the UFC was to Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier beats him by an armbar. They run it back a couple of years ago for the interim title, for the UFC interim title at lightweight. That's what Max self-proclaimed, called himself Muffin Top Max. He said he didn't put on the weight the right way to be able to go up to 155. That was at the height of his run at 145. And, he didn't really put it on the way that he should have in building up the muscle mass, so on and so forth. Well, in the last 2 outings at 155 that Max Holloway has had, he has looked tremendous. And he looks very athletic and fit in the right way at 155. I mean, the fight that he had against Justin Gaethje at UFC 300, still the arguable best finish to a fight, especially given the circumstances that we've ever seen. I mean, that's going to be debatable. People might have their photo finish fights that they put at the higher levels of the list. But for me, the way that fight went, UFC 300, with it being the spectacle that it was against the opponent that it was, arguably still in any given fight, the most violent man on the planet in Justin Gaethje, to do the signature point and knock him out with the last second on the clock, the last tick of the clock, man, and being there live, it's hard. It's going to be hard for anything to ever beat that for me. This fight, it comes out and, you could make the case, and Dustin thought potentially going into the 5th that it was 2-2 going into the 5th. I think that there was a case for it, but it's much more likely, or, without watching it back, I could certainly say that I very much understood that it being 3 rounds to 1 going into that 5th and final round in favor of Max. And then in the 5th round, Max just turned it up. It was not to say apparent that Dustin had slowed down a step, but it was more or less to say that Max just also looked that good in his own respect. And we have to give Max Holloway his credit too, as him being a former champion and having one of the most illustrious runs at the 145-pound division. And he did that so young. Part of what, has kept Max around in the mix. When Max made that debut against Dustin that we just mentioned, he was 19 years old. Max is still in his, early to mid 30s, where there's time on the clock, and he can still continue to make this run at 55. Obviously, there's some adversity with some people that he's already seen at 55, with Ilia Topuria being the champion, but Max has cemented himself as one of the top contenders, in my opinion, at 155 pounds. He knocked out Justin Gaethje, beats Dustin Poirier in a 49-46 basically affair. 4 rounds to 1, if you will. And especially in that last 10 seconds where Max, he knew the time was running close, so he just kind of waited it out, looked up at the clock, sees it hit, here's the short time clacker, gives the point, and got after it. He started to put it on Dustin a little bit, and Dustin had to shell up and just basically preserve himself for that final moment to keep from going out the way for, I don't mean to bash Gaethje by any means, but I don't think Dustin wanted his curtain call to be that image, if you will. He had put up a tough fight all the way to that point, and hey, we got through it. Was able to give off a tremendous speech and a message to the crowd after the fight. Max Holloway, a class act, he said, hey, it was a great night, blah, 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 very short message, but this is Dustin's night. This is not for me. This is Dustin. Give this man the recognition that he deserves. class act from Max on that end, and so much to the point that right after they started going to Dustin, Max didn't think that they gave him a big enough ovation. Max came back for a curtain call to say, hey, get louder for Dustin Poirier. This man deserves the biggest, loudest send-off that you could possibly give him here in New Orleans in his home state. You know, from that message alone, that just goes to show you kind of the character that Max Holloway is. And, you know, Max will have his day to continue in the future and going forward. But for Dustin, you know, to have the video send-off, it's one of those packages that the UFC have put together for these retiring stars. They've been awesome, and someone's cutting some onions in the room most of the time when those start to play. Dustin being able to say his thank yous to his family in the cage, his daughter, his wife, his mom, you know, everybody that was there in the fold. Theo out there in the crowd, the message that Theo had for Dustin in advance, and then what they caught on video of Theo telling Dustin's parents backstage, you know, thank you for your son being able to be this much to all of us. And Dustin talking about how he didn't really realize until coming into this last stage, to this last dance, how widespread his impact was. And, you know, that's somebody who, again, you should be able to just take inspiration and want to have a lot of things that you emulate off of. Dustin Poirier was a guy who comes from Lafayette, Louisiana, who very humble beginnings, fought and earned his way for everything that he had, and, you know, just worked and worked and worked. And I think where people maybe grew a little bit more of an attachment and an attraction to Dustin was he never lost sight of the goal. Yeah, he lost a couple of times in the big fights, or, you know, would get finished, like, say, the last BMF fight, whatever. But you know what he did right after that? He dusted himself off, got back on the horse, and it was right back to work. And that type of grit, determination, and will is something that I think Dustin Poirier's legacy will live on forever. And I hope that he starts to do more of these opportunities on the desk, because somebody who has that sort of reputation by what he did in action, he's going to be able to provide a lot of insight from the analyst desk. Now, how that will always translate, that's always yet to be seen, how people handle being on camera and so on and so forth. But he has a wealth of knowledge in between his ears, and I would just love to, throughout the years, be able to hear more of him sharing just some of the mindset, the insight, the what are you thinking in this type of moment sort of things. But that's the sports nerd, that's the martial arts nerd in me. I love that when it's any sport for that matter. You know, just segue off of that for a second. Right now, there's a lot of content that's been coming out in the baseball world from Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds is a guy who gets knocked in a lot of ways by a lot of people, and there's some things that are due criticisms, but when it comes to the performance that was on the field or the mindset that drove that performance, unparalleled. So to be able to take a trip into the mind of some of these greats, and just mention it by happenstance, but Last Dance with Michael Jordan, being able to hear the mindset of some of these greats is something that I absolutely love, and I hope that we continue to see more of Dustin Poirier. At the same time, though, if Dustin decides that, you know what, I've given everything of me that I could to the fight game, and I'm ready to ride off into the sunset, you know, have my charity, the Good Fight Foundation, and, you know, I'll pop up here and there, but I'm good. I want to spend time with the family now. You know, I want Parker to have her dad. I want Jolie to have her husband. I want to be that guy who's present in my family's lives. I also 100% understand and respect that decision if that's to be the case. One way or the other, Dustin Poirier, thank you. Thank you for everything that you have done for the game. Thank you for providing so much entertainment and inspiration throughout the years. In the co-main event, we had a middleweight matchup between Bohechenia Paulo the Eraser Costa taking on Roman Kopylov. Roman Kopylov is a very talented young fighter, and this was a big test going up against someone who has the experience against the who's who at the top of the division, like a Paulo Costa. Paulo Costa, he turned the clock back. I think that he looked really good in this fight in a lot of sequences. You know, he maybe doesn't have the same finishing power that he once did. I mean, at one point where he was just blitzing everybody. But then again, we only see Paulo so infrequently that maybe he needs to have a little bit more activity, and he starts to find that timing and the rhythm and the groove again. He's calling out Khamzat Chimaev. He's not getting that fight next. Plain and simple. Khamzat's fighting for the title in Chicago against DDP. Paulo is sitting outside the top 10. That's not going to happen right away. But I wouldn't mind seeing that fight happen again. They were supposed to fight in Abu Dhabi a couple of years ago. Paulo had that major staph infection that, if you recall, he had a freaking hole in his elbow, and he still wanted to take the fight just because those guys absolutely hate each other. But that's a conversation for another day. Paulo Costa, though, he did look good, and this was a good bounce back victory for him to really not just show that he can still be competitive, but he can still go out there and he can find his rhythm and he can go take over a fight and win. The next fight this fight was a dog fight. The feature fight in the welterweight division, Kevin Holland had his moments, D-Rod had his moments. They both hurt each other. But in that third and final round, you just saw the dog come out of D-Rod. And in the press conference, there was a little bit of foreshadowing of that. And D-Rod basically just said, hey, I respect that Kevin has a lot of tools. He has a lot of talent, and he's a very good fighter. My route to victory is I need to go in there, get in his face, and be a dog. That's exactly what he did. And, I don't think that we should knock Kevin Holland for this loss in this sense. I mean, it's a very quality veteran, a guy who has seen the rankings and has fought a lot of the tops of the division at 170 in D-Rod, a very experienced veteran, and just, again, in his own respect, a flat-out dog who's hard to put away. Kevin Holland had a lot of bright moments in that fight, and it just came down to a couple of scoring moments in a very, again, tightly contested bout, and D-Rod was able to get his hand raised, but I don't think that really is going to stop a lot of momentum for Kevin Holland going forward. Again, I think that was a quality performance for him. You had Patricio Pitbull be able to bounce back in his sophomore UFC affair. First fight, laid an egg. There's no other way to put it. This time around, it was a much more favorable matchup stylistically against Dan 50K Ige. Dan Ige was going to play a lot more of the game that Patricio was going to want to play, or dimensionally was a better advantage for Pitbull. They were a lot closer in size, and he didn't present the kicking arsenal that Yair does. That's what's so hard to figure out about Yair, and what's so hard to also prepare for Yair Rodriguez is there's just not a lot of guys who bring to the table the tools and the approaches or the entries and the angles that Yair works with. So it's hard to prepare for a guy like that, whereas somebody like Dan Ige, who he's going to want to have a lot more of a boxing heavy approach. He wants to go in there and he wants to punch your head into orbit. We know what he wants. That's why his nickname is 50K. Before that, it was Dynamite Dan. He wants to blow your spot up. Better favorable matchup for him. He picks up the decision victory for Patricio Pitbull, former Bellator champion, in this fight. You had a little bit of humble pie served up in the Michael Johnson versus Daniel Zellhuber matchup. Daniel Zellhuber, very talented young fighter out of Mexico, had a fight of the year affair against Esteban Ribovic at Noche at the Sphere. But Michael Johnson is one of those guys who he's fought about everybody that you can imagine who has been a somebody over the course of, the last 10 plus years. Michael Johnson, we've talked about on this program before, he's the ultimate enigma, because on any given night, he can go in there and beat and hang with the best of the best. But then on any given night, he might also lay an egg and have just a flat performance that you're questioning, how is this the same guy? Let me give you some examples of that. Prior to Tony Ferguson going on his historic run, who beat him? Go ahead and look that one up. Dustin Poirier. We just sang his praises for 10 plus minutes. Who knocked Dustin out? Go look that one up. In each of those cases, you'll find one Michael the Menace Johnson. So again, that's somebody who can compete and hang with any of the best on any given night. And he had a couple of chances to really kind of get himself over the hump in some big fights that just didn't necessarily go his way. But also when you're taking 50-50 fights or some real tough matchups in that sense, well, there's going to be some 50-50 outcomes, right? He was a launching pad for Khabib springing up and with his chatter saying, "Oh, you must give me title shots," so on and so forth. That was Michael Johnson on the other side of that. But again, in there with one of the Mount Rushmore contenders of the division. He was the fighter on the other side of the infamous Nate Diaz comeback after being gone for a little bit of time on that Fox Fight Night card, where he comes back and has the Conor McGregor "you're taking everything I work for" promo. That was Michael Johnson on the other side of that. But once again, somebody who was in there with one of the stalwarts of the division. Nothing replaces experience, folks. And through the years down there, whether it was Hard Knocks 365 to Black Zillions to Sanford to now Killcliff, the talent that Michael Johnson has been in the room with throughout all of those years is endless. I mean, we've seen videos for years and years of some of the wars that he's gotten into in the gym, whether it be with Chandler to Jason Jackson to, again, just some of the top guys and top talent getting after it every single day. If they're not putting each other out, then you do have a bit of an iron sharpens iron effect. There is a certain balance to where you get past that threshold, completely different conversation. But again, just goes to show that in this instance, all the smack talk that Zell Huber was doing and trying to basically write Michael Johnson off, he got served a big slice of humble pie, and Michael Johnson was able to say, "Not so fast, buddy. The old dog's still here." Another couple of fights to touch on before we head off into the next segment here. This one I just want to mention real quick. Atiba Gautier, the middleweight from Cameroon, that dude's for real. Another knockout in the first round, just past 1 minute. That's a guy to keep your eyes on. He's in his early 20s. He's got a lot of future to build on. Athletic, fast twitch, has power, and he's somebody who is going to definitely start to get a push from the UFC marketing machine in the 185-pound division. I have a little bit of an issue with this fight, but I also don't at the same time. We had what won fight of the night, which was Brendan Allen and Marvin Vettori. Really good fight. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think that it was a hell of a scrap. And if there were, I guess, one besides Dustin and Max to win fight of the night, it would be that one. However, I think that the snub from Max and Dustin not getting fight of the night and Dustin's send-off, man, that's a hard one to swallow, and I don't necessarily agree with it. But what I will say is, when you have a grudge match, and especially of these guys at the high level, and when they've had an altercation outside of the cage, like Brendan Allen and Marvin Vettori did at the casino a little over a year ago, sometimes when they actually get into the cage, they're a little bit more timid. These two weren't. These two went at it like they hated each other, and it made for a really fun fight that did go on to win fight of the night. Brendan Allen wins that fight. You know, Marvin Vettori, it's tough to see, you know, what is next for him. I think he's only going to more or less at this point be in these gatekeeper roles. I don't see a route back to the title for Marvin Vettori. Marvin Vettori has had to go through some very tragic adversity and life, lost his brother within the recent history, has had to deal with a litany of injuries, and, you know, stylistically, he's not a technician. He was always a brawler, and who, for lack of a better reference, sometimes just out-toughed guys. He took your beating and then was able to rally through it. I don't know going forward what guys at the top of the division he is going to, outside of as mentioned with Michael Johnson in some of those cases, outside of a 50-50 chance, who does he beat? He's still a big name that still has a chance to make a lot of money with some fun fights, but I do believe that he's going to be a lot more now in that gatekeeper role, where they're going to try to use his name to build that next generation of fighter. What do you guys think? Let me know online. Hit me up on social media at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. That wraps up our talk on UFC 218. We're going to be talking in this next segment this weekend's UFC Fight Night card.
With millions of page views every year, ColoradoPreps.com is the #1 source for the high school sports community to keep up with the latest news and scores. From football and volleyball to basketball and softball, ColoradoPreps.com provides a year-round hub for coaches, friends, and family to stay connected to their favorite schools and athletes, and keep an eye on their rivals. Covering high school sports from the peaks to the plains, you always get the latest at ColoradoPreps.com.
This weekend, we have another version of UFC on ABC going down in the UAE at Etihad Arena. It is going to be a daytime card, so for all of you who are wanting to watch stateside, that's kicking off, it looks like, here at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. So keep your calendars locked for that. Keep in mind that this is going to be a daytime card. We have a main event between a couple of champions, whether it be... one of them, obviously, Robert Whittaker, the Reaper, Bobby Knuckles. He was UFC middleweight champion. And then you had Rainer de Ritter, RDR. He was a double champion in a 2-division champion over there in one championship. That's a guy who came into the UFC, and initially people thought, is this dude really for real? But he's just continued to go out there, performance after performance, and put together wins. This is obviously the biggest test that he's had so far underneath the UFC banner. His fight against Bo Nickel, I think, people maybe thought that Bo was going to go out there and wrestle him and just grind him out that way, but he had no fear of Bo's wrestling. He walked him down and finished him with the body shot. In the case of RDR, I don't know that he has the striking to be able to hang with Robert Whittaker. I do think that he has vastly superior grappling skill set, so I would look for RDR to try to get this down to the canvas early on. But at the same time, he does have some very good Dutch kickboxing. The way that he works around the guard or tries to manipulate it and find and place his shots, he's quality. I just don't know that he is of that same level of a striker the way that Robert Whittaker is. Robert Whittaker has had some ups and downs over the course of the last few fights. I think that maybe the game plan or the blueprint that was written by Khamzat Chimaev is going to be something that RDR looks at and says, hey, I can go submit this guy right away. I wouldn't be surprised if that were to be the case. But again, that's why they fight the fight. Styles make fights. You have a co-main event match, which is, to me, this is a tremendous risk for Petr Yan. He's fighting against Marcus McGee, taking a significant dip down in the rankings. But at the same time, Petr Yan has had he's had some issues with finding some opponents at times, or then dates, so on and so forth. I still think that he is one of the most talented guys at 135 pounds in the world. That little Siberian gangster has ridiculous boxing. His footwork is elite. He's much better on the ground than he gets credit for. And when he needs to be, he's not afraid to go and get mean. Marcus McGee, a little bit older in the division when he entered into the UFC, but a very quality, a game vet who's been in there with some tough veterans, has had some wins against quality guys. I think that this is a very big bite for him to chew in somebody like a Petr Yan. Maybe he has the strength and the grappling to be able to put a body on Yan enough to not get outboxed. But I think if Marcus McGee can't close the distance and really just kind of turn this into a grinded out sort of matchup and a dogfight to where he can outlast Petr Yan, I don't know how Marcus McGee wins this fight. I mean, I'm just being completely honest. It's not that I don't like Marcus McGee. I respect Marcus McGee, but this big of a jump against the caliber of a guy that Petr Yan is, I don't see a route to victory other than him having what everybody has in a puncher's chance. In the feature fight, we have the Pirate making his return. You have Sharabullet Magomedov coming into this fight at 15-1, taking on the power bar Marc-Andre Barrio. Sharabullet is a guy who, on any given night, he could produce a top 10 level highlight reel knockout. But for a Dagestani, I have never seen a more trash grappler who has made it to this stage of the game. I mean, some of the just some of the things fundamentally that he doesn't do in a fight to get up, to work himself off the cage, just some of those little, again, what I for what he was hyped to be, would imagine to be some very base level fundamentals. He doesn't really have those, but does he have power? Does he have the mindset where he's willing to go risk it for the biscuit, throw some crazy spinning attacks, and does that produce some crazy results at times? 100%. I mean, the double spin and back fist knockout that he had, that's a knockout that will play on in highlight reel, that will play on highlight reels in perpetuity, just the way that went on. But his last fight, he fights Michael Venom Page. Michael Venom Page making that trip up to 185 and just having the fun fight, a striker's delight against somebody who he knows doesn't want to go to the ground, and on the same, by the token, same side of the opposite side of the same token, doesn't want to grapple either. Well, Michael Venom Page was by far and large, he was the faster, more technical striker and dominated that fight. This is a matchup though for Charr to potentially go out there against Marc-Andre Barriault and get his lick back. The UFC likes what he brings to the table in terms of his lore. And did a little bit of that get lost by losing the last fight against MVP? Sure. But you can spin that loss if he comes back with a very exciting knockout, or at least a strong performance in this fight against a guy who is a quality veteran and a gatekeeper type role of opponent in power bar. But this is a big fight for Charr, because if Charr doesn't have a good showing in this, then people are going to start to lose a lot more faith in him than they maybe had after they were calling him a fraud from that fight with MVP. I think that, again, as a striker, he's fun to watch. How that fares against some of the elite of the division, though, because he does get hit. He does leave himself open for damage, and when you take that big risks, you are also very susceptible to being countered and being put out in the process. That sort of crazy flash and erratic movement and exploding all over the place, throwing spinning things, that's going to work maybe all the way up through, mid-level of the division. But when you start talking about, again, some of the tops of the top, that's where you're going to start to run into issues. And I think that I don't want to say that we've seen him top out or that we've seen him plateau, but I think we've seen kind of what he is. And I don't know that Charr is too willing to grow and evolve past what his skill set is. He just loves to go in there, get wild, throw. And, I guess what is best to say is this weekend will be a good indicator of how much he's willing to humble himself, to go back to the drawing board and improve on what actually needs to be improved upon. That was his first loss against MVP, so we'll see how he follows that up this weekend. You have a 125-pound flyweight matchup between rising contenders and Asu Amabayev taking on Jose Ochoa. You have Nikita Krylov taking on Bogdan Guskov. This could be a big breakout performance opportunity for Bogdan Guskov. The doppelganger for Anthony Smith has definitely made a mark since he's been in the UFC so far. He's taken on a guy who has been ranked for a long time now in Nikita Krylov out of the Ukraine. Big opportunity for him to springboard himself and move closer toward being in title contention. You have a fight going down in the bantamweight division between Bryce Mitchell taking on Syed Nurmagomedov. Thug Nasty wants to go get his lick back. He fell short, unfortunately, against Gene Silva in his last fight for his sake. He told a hilarious story. I mean, whether you like him or not, for whatever reason, one thing that people cannot say is that Bryce Mitchell can't tell funny stories. So if you check his Instagram out from roughly around a week ago, somewhere around in there, of him telling the story of how changing rooms in UAE aren't how changing rooms that we perceive them here in America are. I will not do this story any justice by telling it to you. I just encourage you to go check it out, because I sat there for, the 3-4 minutes, whatever the post was, laughing the entire time, and especially the little one-liners and things that he was throwing in the mix. Hilarious. But he's got a tough opponent in Said Nurmagomedov. I think that stylistically, Nurmagomedov has an advantage in the kickboxing department. Grappling-wise, Thug is as solid of a grappler as as you can be in the top of the division. Has he gotten submitted and has he been bested by a couple of guys? Sure. But he's willing to step into the fire and willing to go get after it. He is a black belt. He is creative in the process. And he has some positions that he is ultra creative with, that he finds ways to unlock new little wrinkles to do some damage en route to hunting for a submission. And he's not afraid to get mean either. On the flip side, again, you have Said Nurmagomedov. He's going to be performing in front of a crowd that is absolutely behind him. It'll be interesting to see how Bryce bounces back, especially just considering all of the adversity that he's had to face for some of the things that he said, outside of the cage and since that point. You have a welterweight matchup between Muslim Salikhov taking on Carlos Leal. Damon Blackshear has been so active over the last couple of years since he's been in the UFC. Damon Blackshear back in the mix. He is taking on the always tough Davy Grant. Amanda Ibas taking on Tabitha Ricci at 115 pounds. Baby Shark and Amanda Ibas, this is going to be a fight that these ladies are going to go out there and they're going to go after it. They're on the prelims. They have the potential to steal the show just from the spirit that they're going to go out there and fight with. As nice and as bubbly and friendly as Amanda Ibas is outside of the cage, again, I still say if I could love anything as much as Amanda Ibas loves chocolate, then that'd be a great place in life. Tabitha Ricci, one of the best grapplers in the division, has been continually building up her striking acumen, and her man being Callum Walsh, the famous English boxer. That's helped her elevate and level up her game on the striking department. But, this is a really tough fight against Amanda Ibas, who is going to be, I imagine, probably going to have a little bit of a size advantage in the process. It's going to be a fun fight, though. They're definitely going to go out there and they're going to put everything in the cage. A couple more matchups to talk about on the way out here. Or one more matchup, I should say, that I really want to hit on. And this, to me, is it's a special fight that, I've done a lot of crapping on the heavyweight division lately, and it's not without proper due for it. The heavyweight division overall right now, it sucks. It's terrible across every promotion, not just the UFC. The lack of just consistency of quality athletes and fighters is the worst that it's ever been in the heavyweight division. But they have had some new life just get signed into the UFC with Buchecha. Buchecha is going to be taking on Martin Buday, and this on this card, that's going to be Buchecha's first affair in the UFC. Stood out in one is, you don't have enough digits to be able to count the amount of times that he's won world championships in the grappling world. He's won ADCC, IBJJFs, and we're not just talking once, we're talking years. And then in the years where he didn't win, he was still a podium placer and still a finisher, and that's whether it was weight class or absolutes. He was placing all across the board. I'm excited to see what he does in the heavyweight division of the UFC, because he is a little bit older. He's in his mid-30s, but as a heavyweight, you can extend the clock a little bit because speed isn't as much a factor, and especially when he has a skill set in the grappling department that can neutralize where a lot of the potential threats would come from, along with just, again, the heavyweight division sucks right now. He has a chance to go on and make a run. Maybe not after this fight, but a couple down the way. Seeing a matchup between him and Walter Walker, two big boys who can grapple and are skilled at jiu-jitsu. I wouldn't mind seeing that. And, again, we've talked about this on the program before. Walter Walker has the three heel hook finishes so far. And he's a really good grappler in the heavyweight division. But how good? When we start stacking him up against somebody like Buchecha, who is, by merit and by resume, one of the absolute best grapplers that the heavyweight division has ever seen. First step, though, is this Saturday. He has to get past Martin Buday before we start getting to what are some of the top-end potential matchups for Buchecha. Will the UFC jitters get to him? We talked about that earlier on the program, how Patricio Pitbull, he fell short in his first affair in the UFC because of that same sort of situation. Will that be the case for Buchecha? We will see on Saturday. What do you guys think about the card? You could let me know online. Hit me up on social media. That's on Instagram or on Threads at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. Stick around after the break. We're going to be talking a little bit more combat sports. As always, folks, we're going to close out the show by going 3 rounds. In the very first round, we say Misfits Boxing 22 has signed a lot of high-profile athletes for their upcoming August 30th card. Are you interested at all? You have Luke Rockhold, who is going to be fighting Darren Till for their 205 Bridgerweight title. But because it's those two guys, yeah, I'm definitely interested in watching those two, just simply because of the profile, who they are, what they've done. Luke Rockhold being former Strikeforce champion, UFC champion, Darren Till being a former UFC title challenger who has fought, a lot of the who's who of 170 as well as 185 before he got released from the UFC and has gone on to some of these other ventures. Luke Rockhold has gone on and performed on some other platforms, whether that be BKFC, whether that be in the Karate Combat Pit, or also at CJI last year when he went up against Pat Downey. This is a fight where I think there's a couple of vets who they've been talking a lot of trash, who Darren Till is winning the lip sparring battle for sure. I mean, nobody ever accused Luke Rockhold of being a good smack talker. That's kind of been his Achilles heel throughout the entirety of his career, is open mouth, insert foot type of moments. Luke Rockhold has came out in some recent interviews and said it really doesn't matter what the rule set or what the discipline is. I can beat Darren Till in any form of fighting, whether that's MMA, whether that's grappling, whether that is boxing, kickboxing, bare knuckle, so on and so forth. I can beat Darren Till in any form or fashion of fighting. Outside of straight traditional boxing, he's got a great point. But when you start talking boxing, I don't know that it's that easy of a situation for Luke Rockhold. I think that in pure boxing, Darren Till is really talented. Darren Till was just not a good grappler. That was the Achilles heel for him during his run with the UFC, was that anytime you put him on his back, we're going to have success. Plain and simple. You could look back to the title fight with Woodley. You could look at the fight with DDP, and you could say, oh, yeah, he blew his knee, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Still, though, in other fights and other just notable situations, Darren Till did not have the ability to keep people from imposing their will on him as a grappler. Luke Rockhold would definitely win in that realm. But when we're talking just straight boxing, that's the highest percentage of victory that Darren Till is going to have. And I don't know, this might not go so well for Luke Rockhold. Luke Rockhold thought that things were going to go well for him in BKFC. Well, he threw the towel in on himself because of the injuries that he sustained inside of the circle. Be interesting to see, though, when they put on full gloves, how this goes back and forth. And Luke Rockhold's still in tremendous shape overall. I know he still fancies himself some partying, despite what may be the official claims publicly or whatnot. But Darren Till is no person who is shy of that scene himself. It'll be a fun night for them to go out there and box. And I'm sure as the next month unfolds before we get to August 30th, there's going to be a lot of media opportunities. There's going to be some face-to-faces. I'm sure we'll probably be on Ariel's show at some point doing, the talk over each other on the Zoom call the entire time sort of thing, along with press conferences and so on and so forth. So that's a fight that you guys can look forward to here at the end of August. This other fight, Tony Ferguson, he's fighting Salt Poppy. He's fighting an influencer in a boxing match. And why? I aside from, hey, go get the money, go get the bag, whatever they're paying you, Tony, I hope that it's worth it. Because if for some reason this does not go well for Tony, you just start getting to a point of the reputation, the legacy, that everything that you built just continues to wither away and tarnish. For as storied of a winning streak as he went on is as tragic as a losing streak as he is now finding himself in the middle of after that loss to Justin Gaethje back in 2020. He's never been the same guy ever since then. Has never looked the same. Has never had more than just maybe sequences of flashes of the old Kukui. But again, he's never been that guy ever since that point. And boxing against a young guy who only really specializes in boxing, and Tony's not known for being a straight traditional boxer or following within that rule set. What always made Tony really great as a striker was his fluidity, his creativity. He would take risks, and yeah, he's going to box, but when he misses, he's spinning and throwing elbows. He's finding different little wrinkles and rolling and spinning and everything in the process. You can't do that in boxing. And you have a kid who started off as just kind of an internet influencer, who then has grown himself into a boxer by competing on multiple of these Misfits type cards. Again, if you lose to that guy, it is done. It is absolutely over. Put a fork in it. The fat lady is singing at this point. Also on that card, you have another notorious member, or come, I guess I should say, directly from the former camp of the notorious Conor McGregor. You have Dillon Danis. Dillon Danis is making his return to MMA. He's going to be fighting for what has been reported to be their 170-pound title. Whether you actually get Dillon Danis to show up to a fight, who knows? Dillon may be soaking in all of the publicity and all of the rub right now, getting some sponsor nods, getting a couple little stipends here and there in the process, and a couple weeks out for the fight, got a little strain. I'm not going to be able to make it to fight night. But got all the publicity and all of that to parlay into just continuing to make money to sustain his lifestyle. Dillon Danis is a dude who, he plays the heel role. He knows that he's a heel. And there's not too many positives that you can ever really say about the guy. Yeah, he went out and fought in the Paul boxing match, but they hated each other so much that I understood why he actually went out there and made it to that fight. It's because those guys wanted to fight, whether it was on a stage there or fighting, on the corner in LA when he was getting pranked on Food Truck Diaries when they drove by and threw rolls of toilet paper at him. That's one that he was going to show up for because of the personal connection. This one, who knows? And a couple of the other fights that Dillon has been a part of, he was supposed to be in the GFL mix. Obviously, that all fizzled. That one was to no fault of his own. But, if we actually get him there on fight night, that'll be a surprise. Next round, you have Tyson Fury saying that he would pick Jake Paul to win against Anthony Joshua by knockout if they would ever actually box. CTE is real, folks. If Tyson Fury really truly believes that to be the case for a reason anything other than just trying to create some attention, just trying to have a little bit of buzz about him and stay in the headlines, then he needs to be evaluated. Because if you think that Jake Paul is going to pull that off against a legit champion, especially now anywhere around this stage, you are off your rocker, my man. Dana White officially put the brakes on the discussion for Jon Jones headlining the White House card in 2026. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that he's just, one, in general, Dana took the position of saying that card is a year away. The entire landscape of everything is going to be different by the time that we get to next year. So even discussing what certain matchups would be at this stage, it's all for naught. That's all just lip service at this point. It's not going to be for anything that would materialize or anything that's actually concrete. Totally understand with that. Also, when you add to the equation all of the distractions, adversity elements, legal situations, past drug occurrences, all that comes with Jon Jones, and especially some of these things that just seem to be coming out of the woodworks with other charges or cases and whatnot, I understand Dana White saying, I cannot trust putting Jon Jones in this position for such an important occasion. I can't trust putting him in this spot and getting burned. It's happened to us before in the past. I do not want that to be the case again in the future. Can't blame him right there. But just like that, though, folks, that wraps it up for this week of the MMA Plug. I want to thank you all so much each and every week for joining us for Original Combat Sports programming. Huge shout out to everybody here at the Mile High Sports crew, especially my man Danny Bailey holding it down for me each and every week. Hope to see you out here on some of these local Colorado shows. We'll see you back here next week, same time, same place. I'm Jordan Kurtz. Give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports.